Good morning, everyone. My name is Yunjin, and I'm honored to attend this conference and represent the research team to introduce our research paper today. The topic of our research paper is Exploring the Role of GIS in Urban Green Spaces Governance for Restoring Children's Resilience during COVID-19. In today's presentation, I will start with the following logic: research background, research process and method, main findings, and importance and practice. Let's start with the research background. The research background involves three major streams: children's resilience, pandemic, and GIS technology. Children living in high-density metro areas are increasingly separated from urban green spaces, resulting in challenges to their growth and well-being, especially their resilience. The COVID-19 has aggravated this separation due to the requirement for children to stay at home for extended periods, which is counterproductive for enabling Goal 3 of the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. GIS is progressively being applied to urban planning and development problems to assist designers and policymakers in creating safe and sustainable urban green spaces. However, there is a limited knowledge about how strategically locating green spaces in cities can improve the livability of children. Therefore, this study sought to explore the patterning of green spaces and its relationship to key demographic information during the COVID-19 period, with the aim of providing insight into the potential for GIS-informed green spaces planning for children. Based on the analysis, the research team put forward a research question to answer in this paper. How are urban green spaces influencing resilience of children living in high-density metro areas? Now let's start to introduce the research methodologies. How can we answer this research question? Research team conducting two GIS case studies of the central living districts in Melbourne, Australia, and Beijing, China. The entire process can be divided into three major steps. Number 1, collecting digital spatial data, mainly normalized differences, vegetation index, landscape index, and vegetation coverage from Australia and Chinese GIS databases, respectively. Step 2, importing data to ArcGIS, analyzing and comparing data by visual mapping and calculating the derived parameters. Number 3, exporting the data and integrating relevant policy and human behavior theories to further explore and practical meanings of those green patterns. After adopting those methods, let's talk about the findings. Based on summary of the greening characteristics of both districts, there are three major differences. Number 1, compare with inner basin districts. Inner Melbourne districts present a comparatively higher agglomeration and dense greenery coverage. And in the inner Melbourne districts, the largest patches of natural and semi-natural landscape types present richer and more influential services and functions to the local landscape patterns and biological system. However, the species richness in inner basin district of extra large patches occupied by the gardens and parks could present a greater environmental and ecological value than inner Melbourne district. After the analysis of these parameters, Researchers combined with local policy and human behavior theories, respectively. Then there are two major findings. Number one, the geospatial feature in inner Melbourne district could reflect more powerful policy advantages than Beijing, such as provide more dense greenery coverage with more chance for the local young generation to use. Number two, inner Melbourne districts appears more advantaged in terms of supporting high accessibility, availability, and inclusion for local children. Based on those 2 points, we can speculate that the greening patterns of inner Melbourne districts could present more beneficial functions in terms of cultivating children's resilience, especially after disaster. After the discussion of the finding, let's talk about the importance and practice of this research. The significance of this research can be summarized as two aspects, macro and micro. In terms of macro, the finding of this study illustrates the benefits of integrating GIS in urban green spaces planning, especially in cultivating children's resilience in the face of ongoing adversity in response to disasters. This has positive implications for smart and economically prosperous cities for future generations, and also for the urgent enablement of critical early childhood development outcomes in densely populated urban settlement. In terms of macro, based on the findings on geoanalysis of those two inner suburbs locations in Beijing and Melbourne, corresponding inferences and suggestions can be made from those pieces of information of mapping exercise and delivered to the local government for forming meaningful decision support. It also can provide relevant service providers, including landscape architects and urban planners, the evidence-based knowledge. The research team also put forward the corresponding suggestions for both local government and service providers. Number one, for Beijing, the recommendation for Beijing policymakers and service providers are to increase the homogeneity and reduce fragmentation of green spaces. The aim is to increase the chance for the inner district residents, especially the young generation, to access equally and those spaces to recover from the pandemic crisis. Number two, for Melbourne. For the Melbourne government, the corresponding recommendations are increasingly maintaining the current green infrastructure and developing more open large green patches to enhance the inner ecological features for extending and deepening young residents' green experience with inner urban suburb. Thank you for listening.